Due to a global pandemic, extended time at home with the family is definitely in the future for a lot of us. So you might be looking for new adventures. In this video, why Dungeons and Dragons or similar tabletop role-playing games are a great option for families looking for a new hobby, and some advice on how you can get into it. Hi everyone, my name is Nate, and you are watching WASD20, a channel about tabletop RPGs and fantasy maps. Today's video is sponsored by Hero Forge. If you're starting a new D&D game, it's the perfect time to create your own custom miniature for your character using Hero Forge's amazing editor. My kids and I have seriously been going nuts lately creating new characters, and they are always adding new races, items, and other options. After you're done editing, you can order your miniature in a variety of materials and they'll have it shipped right to your home. Or you can purchase the STL file and 3D print it on your own. So go to heroforge.com right now and get creating with a free account. I am sure you'll be impressed by what you see. I'm not sure about your family, but for us, summer vacation started yesterday. School's out and I'm really ready for us all to go back to school now. Please, can we go back to school now? Just can't be. So even as some places are starting to reopen a bit, social distancing and canceled events and vacations are still very much a reality for us this summer. Staring down the barrel of a lot more time at home with family, it's time for some D&D, my friends. So this video is mostly intended for those of you who are living at home with family members who may have little to no experience with tabletop RPGs. If that's not you, hopefully you can still get something out of this video, but perhaps you also know of someone who this does apply to and you can share it with them, helping out a friend in need and winning some new converts to this wonderful hobby. Now, I want to recognize that another huge part of pandemic life is also playing tabletop RPGs online, and I hope to do another video on that topic very soon, so make sure you're subscribed. So first, let's talk about why I think tabletop RPGs are worth looking into as a family hobby, and then I'll give some advice on what you need to do to get started. So why this hobby? Tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons are games, yes, but they can also be collaborative storytelling experiences. Even if you're playing a story-light, pure dungeon crawl style game, like my boys tend to prefer, these are cooperative experiences that place a heavy emphasis on creative problem solving. Players will do best when they are working together, and these games reward out-of-the-box thinking. Then there's also the role-playing side of things. Tabletop RPGs give you a reason to bust out your funny voices as you play characters, monsters, and heroes, and use your imagination to tell stories together. For kids, tabletop RPGs can build confidence, help with basic math skills and social skills as you have to work together as a group, listen to one another, and learn to share the spotlight. I could go on, but I really do think it's an amazing hobby that provides so many avenues for creativity, growth, and fun. So if you're convinced enough to launch into this hobby with your family, there are many ways to go about this, but personally, I think for most newcomers, it's a good idea to pick up one of these boxed sets because they're pretty cheap at like 12 to 20 bucks, and they come with everything you need to get started. Now, you'll need one person to be a dungeon master or game master, and you'll need at least one other person to be a player. If you have 3 to 5 players in addition to the dungeon master, I recommend the starter set because I just personally like the adventure a little bit better. If you have only 1 or 2 players in addition to you, I'd recommend the adventure kit because the included adventure is actually scalable for many group sizes, and yes, it even works with 1 DM and 1 player. It's also pretty easy to have 1 player on this quest and then 2 or 3 on the next quest, and so on. Both of these boxes come with dice, character sheets, and a starter rulebook and an adventure book. There's a lot more to say in comparing and contrasting them, but this one does have more extras. Still, for me, it's a really tough call, which I actually like better, and I'm working on an outline for a longer video on that topic sometime in the near future. If you're kind of new to this, learning to play is a bit of work, but I think these sorts of boxes make it a lot easier. You can do it, and it can be a lot of fun for your family to learn together. Now, a quick note, if you're totally new to this and you're already confused by some of the terms I'm throwing around like Dungeon Master or Game Master or tabletop role-playing game, the instructions in these boxes actually do a really good job of explaining all of that, but don't feel like you need to wait until you get one of these. I have a beginner's guide to D&D on my website, and there you'll find how to play D&D videos, character creation tutorials, and even a D&D buyer's guide that's very beginner friendly. So I'll put a link right up at the top there and you can check that out. Now let's talk about some other tabletop RPGs for a moment. While I personally love D&D 5th edition, there are actually some tabletop RPGs that are a bit more kid-friendly than D&D. So especially if you have really young kids, check out games like Hero Kids or No Thank You Evil. There are many others as well, but these are a couple that I have had pretty positive experiences with my kids, and I'll put links to these and the other boxes down in the video description. You can check those out. If you know of any other games that are really kid-friendly, I'd love to hear your suggestions down in the comments. These games aren't going to be quite as deep, and it might be a bit harder to run a really long ongoing campaign, but especially if you have kids in that like 5 to 7 year old range, you may have a lot better luck with these because there are simpler rule systems. You'll need less adjusting in terms of level of violence and things like that. Still, I think there are ways to adjust Dungeons and Dragons and simplify it even on the fly a bit if you really want to go for it. Younger kids just might need a little bit more help or some modifications. They'll also certainly need shorter game sessions. It's pretty hard to find a D&D session with teens or adults that's less than 2 or 3 hours. But with kids under 10, I generally try not to go very far over an hour. Also, consider the genre when you're selecting a game. If fantasy isn't really the best fit for your family, you might try one of these Star Wars RPG box sets. These are pretty good. Numenera also makes a starter set, and this is kind of like science fantasy, like far-flung future Magitech sort of stuff. There are hundreds of other tabletop RPGs spanning almost any genre you can imagine, so definitely feel free to explore things you might find interesting or your family might find more appealing. Speaking of what's appealing for your family, a word of caution here. Maybe you've tried an RPG and your family just isn't feeling it. That's okay, don't be too pushy. If you're a parent, I think it's a great idea to invite your kids into those things that interest you. But if they ultimately don't enjoy it, leave it alone for a while. You tried and maybe you can come back to it later. Just because it's your thing doesn't mean it has to be their thing. And don't forget to express interest and be willing to engage with their hobbies as well. I don't really enjoy playing Fortnite with my son and his friends or talking in squeaky voices while pretending to be a family of ponies with my daughter.
It's time for you to go to bed, Rainbow Dash. But Mommy, I didn't even get my pony ice cream.
These are things my kids enjoy, so once in a while I make a point to join them in those things. And I even leave my dice behind, so I'm not tempted to ask my daughter for a persuasion check with the pony arguments. And apparently this is turning into like a parenting advice video, which I'm definitely not qualified for, so sorry about that. Lastly, enjoy all of the creative pursuits that go along with this hobby. The accessories, world building, writing, drawing maps, painting miniatures, crafting terrain, 3D printing, drawing character portraits, collecting pretty dice. There's so much there. Now, all of this is optional stuff. You can keep it simple. No need for maps, miniatures, or terrain to play these games. Character sheets, pencils, dice, done. But these really fun and creative pursuits are there if you're looking for things to add to your game or ways to pass the time when you're stuck at home without much else to do. One of my personal favorites is painting miniatures, but I will provide this word of warning to parents looking into getting your kids into mini painting with you. With my own kids, I often invite them to watch me paint, and I certainly let them play with my miniatures and dice carefully. But when I actually let them paint a mini at ages 5, 8, and 11, I'm mostly running around with a wet rag, cleaning up, and helping them. I've learned that I should not try to paint my own miniature at the same time that they are. It's just too much. Hopefully I'll get there someday soon. So I know these are hard times for a lot of us, but I also hope our current situation draws families closer together, and games like this that allow us to adventure, to be heroes, and to just laugh together and roll some dice while telling some cool stories, Seemed like a pretty decent option. If you are trying D&D with your family for the first time recently, I would love to hear your stories of how that's going down in the comments. And if you experienced gamers have advice for some of these newcomers, leave that down below as well. Lastly, if you find these videos helpful and you want to support my work, I am on Patreon. I'd like to thank all these amazing people who are supporting me on Patreon, and there's some pretty cool rewards that they get too. Like, if you actually want some help getting started in this hobby, I do monthly one-on-one calls with patrons at the higher levels. And all patrons get access to weekly live map drawing streams with me. So check it all out over at patreon.com/WASD20. Thanks, patrons. Thank you all for watching, and take care, everybody. You'll see me again very soon.